man, you hit me hard with this one. I'm sure people will eviscerate me in the comments. Bullshit. You're living in fantasy land. Friends, have you ever heard the term variety? It's the spice of life. Well, apparently the producers wanted to add some more variety to the show, so we sat down and we brainstormed ideas. The problem with the brainstorming session, the producers are Gen Z. So apparently they have this thing called beef with certain topics. Now, I personally like Al's beef in Chicago, but their beef is very negative. So what they wanted me to do was weigh in on certain hot takes on different topics that you guys have beef with. Now, they told me that I shouldn't, how did they put it? Oh yeah, they didn't want me to sound like an arrogant, pissed off New Yorker.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
Now, I can't promise that part, but I know we're gonna have fun with this.
I believe I'm speeding.
There's really no nice way to put this. No shit, Sherlock. That's what happens when you cram down the throat of an entire industry. You need to keelhaul your entire system, and you don't even have the B side that's required to make it work. It's only one half of the equation, probably less than one half of the equation. For the car manufacturer to come out with electric vehicles that are viable, you need an infrastructure and then you need a grid. So it's like three things, and you didn't have two of the things in place. Oh, and by the way, you had a global economic meltdown right before you did these mandates, thus changing affordability and price elasticity on cars. So people already had a hard time affording $30,000 cars. How do you expect them to afford $50,000 cars? What's that old saying? The reports of my death are greatly over-exaggerated. I'm old enough to remember when the Japanese were taking over the world, specifically in the real estate world. And wow, in 1991, that kind of blew up in their face. China's kind of the same thing. You see, there's two things going on here. In New York, we have a saying, sometimes you can make a pizza so cheap, nobody wants to eat it. And that's where the Chinese car industry is. Yeah, you can get like a Porsche Taycan knockoff that does a lot of the things the Porsche Taycan does, has all the same tech, but if I were to put you behind the wheel of that and the Porsche, there's no way you would want to drive the Chinese car unless it were like half price. And that's where we get into the second bit. I don't want to sound like a non-free trade guy. I am a free trade guy, but you gotta have some like fair play rules. And if a certain industry or a certain player in the industry is dumping product into a market, which effectively is what the Chinese auto market is doing in Europe, and that's why they're so successful, that's where you gotta have some guardrails. And I think you're gonna see not just the US, because they're the ones that have been the most vocal about this, you're gonna see other first world nations that say, you know what? I think you're doing the wrong thing here on your pricing, because the cost in third world nations to build a car is about the same, whether it's China or Mexico. How is China doing so, making it so much cheaper? Now, I'm sure people will eviscerate me in the comments, but that's like from a very like 30,000 foot level. And as you see like the US and others start to say, hey, China, we need to make sure you're playing by the rules here, I think Europe will kind of fall in by the wayside. And then that in turn is gonna make a Chinese car about the same price as like something built in Mexico or other third world countries. And all of a sudden, you're gonna get back to sometimes you just don't want a pizza so cheap that nobody wants to eat it.
Oh, the future is here. Look at this magnificent machine, the pinnacle of green technology. We are saved.
Tell me you're an EV evangelist without saying you're an EV evangelist. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I don't like EVs. I'm a big fan of EVs, I am as cheap as the day is long. I have this dream of buying like a beat-up old BMW i3 and charging it here in the hangar and never have to put gas in a car again. But that's for very specific instances. So if I live in a place like LA, San Francisco, Miami, Dallas, there's these mature or somewhat mature infrastructures that you can actually charge your car. More importantly, you kind of need a garage. You need your own place to park the car and plug it in for it to be viable in your daily life. For the rest of us, the ones that don't have a garage, for the folks that can't afford a $50,000 car, or for the folks that don't want to spend $3,000 on a used Nissan Leaf and have it have a range of like 25 miles, ICE is going to be around for a hell of a long time. Sadly, somewhat yes. And there's one big reason for it. They're just cheaper to produce, and cheaper and faster to produce. So like, for example, when I first started doing this in 2009, the general time to develop an entirely new car was anywhere from 5 to say 7 years if you're talking something like a Lamborghini Revuelto. Now it's 3 years, and if we look at like special projects like the Hummer EV, that was 18 months. Now granted, they kind of cheated there because that car, they had a platform they were already developing for the Silverado EV, and they're like, what if we were to bring Hummer back? So is it a bad thing? No, but let's not like engineer the analog out. That's all I'm asking. So this is one of these things. Actually, let me give you this like provision. I was pre-law. Very few people know that. So I'm fascinated by the law. And when it comes to someone saying, there's gonna be autonomous taxis in like 6 months, I call bullshit. And here's why. Lawyers. The beauty, or really the benefit of lawyers in this case, we don't know what we don't know. So the technology, I was in tech for 15 years, so I know how fast technology moves. Yeah, I think the technology is definitely there. We could argue the merits of like the Robotaxi versus what some of the other companies are doing. But in reality, in limited deployment, like geofencing, it actually works. The question is, what happens when something goes wrong? That's what the lawyers are working out, and that's what takes time. That's the wrong point or question. Government regulations are bankrupting private industry. But see, here's the problem. The folks that get elected to municipality, whatever it is, whether it be in Brussels or in Europe, they could have been lawyers, in some cases they're doctors, in some cases they're business people. But in very few cases, they are very successful business people. It's kind of like the old saying, those who can do, those who can't teach. And that applies to kind of like policy. So you get a lot of these people, you know, the best of intentions, they have these dreams and they want to change things. Great, I applaud you. And no one is going to argue with you for clean air and clean water. But there's this thing called reality in life. And reality means if I'm going to go in a boat, it makes sense to bring the boat close to the dock before you jump into the boat. And with this whole like EV mandate stuff, it was a lot of pie in the sky stuff, very progressive regulators that said, let's all jump in the boat. But the problem was the dock was here and the boat's over here and they want to make the jump. Even if you have a running start, you're going for a swim. I think they are a very good bridge, yes. Hybrids are a great answer to the how do we get clean air, how do we get more efficiency, how do we get clean water? Because if you think about it, the very root level of the problem, the first principles theory, the purpose of a hybrid is to transfer the need, the demand for a lot of torque to the electric motor that works more efficiently when you are accelerating from, say, a red light. But when you're driving down the freeway, it's more efficient to create energy out of that internal combustion engine, especially when you get into diesels and that kind of stuff. So really the plug-in hybrid, or even just a hybrid, is a great bridge to lower the dependency on, say, fossil fuels, or use less of it and create cleaner tailpipe emissions, but also make the cars more efficient in the process, meaning more efficient in accelerating. It's not just that it's cleaner, it's perhaps even a little bit more fun to drive when you get instantaneous torque. Ask anybody who drives a Panamera Turbo SE hybrid. Bullshit. I know people that get angry about Elon. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but the reality is the man has built a better mousetrap. If you think about it, this man has started and grown disruptor businesses in 3 separate industries, literally commercialized space transport. Tesla came out with the Model S the year this show started. And now how many cars does he have? Apparently I'm doing something wrong. So I'm never gonna bet against a guy like that. And even if you're mad at him, you don't like his politics, he's still built a better mousetrap than you. So instead of getting angry, figure out a way, okay, how do I benefit or learn from this kind of stuff instead of getting pissed off and doing the doom scrolling? Okay, so there you have it. The world according to MotoMan, at least in the whole soup of hot beef topics, hot pockets, whatever you kids call it these days. Now, here's the catch. I've known you guys for 16 years. That's longer than some of my producers have been alive. And I know you guys have opinions, many opinions. So, comments below. Agree, disagree on any of these things? And then, before we go, the producers told me that I gotta yell at you. And I gotta yell at you because they think it would be a good idea to make this a regular thing. But again, I've known you for 16 years. Do you think it's a good idea? Because we are, in all seriousness, we know that we are here only because of you. We are incredibly thankful that you guys have been on this ride with us for up to 16 years, and we're gonna continue to do this and try new things like this. So the producers were very specific about the instructions. Do you want to do this format? Don't tell us in the comments below. Instead, comment and tag on X and Reddit. Or Instagram too. Let's add that one in there. And then we'll take a poll whether we do this in the future. Until we see you in the next episode, bis später. Mom, I'm a producer now. I'm a producer. I made it, Mom. I'm big time.